The opposite of happiness. What is that? What's the opposite of happiness? It's not fear, it's not sadness, it's not depression. It's actually Hey guys, so today we're going to be going over what I think is one of the best books out there, just in general. It is a book on philosophy, it's a book on how to look at the world and a way to navigate through the world. It's also a bit of a business book. It's the 4-Hour Workweek. So, Cal Newport recently wrote an article for the New York Times called Revisiting the 4-Hour Workweek. And I heard about that article while listening to the Tim Ferriss show, which I'm a huge fan of, because I've been a huge fan of Tim Ferriss ever since I read the 4-Hour Workweek, probably almost 15 years ago now. And it got me thinking about the 4-Hour Workweek and about whether it's still relevant or not. It was, like I said, almost 15 years ago. And it's basically a book about how to become a digital nomad, how to, escape the 9-to-5 is in the title. And I remember it being a book a lot on the how to, what websites to use, what, the technical side of becoming a digital nomad. And this was back in 2007. So just the idea that you could, work remotely and for fewer hours, or work for yourself as a one-person company, all that was a pretty revolutionary idea. I mean, it was the same year the iPhone came out, 2007 is when the book came out. But nowadays, that's not a new idea. Everyone and their brother's digital nomad or working remotely, especially during the pandemic, Zoom calls and all that. That's just the norm these days. So if the tech is outdated and the news is old, is there any value in the 4-Hour Workweek anymore? I mean, I've been recommending this book to people for years, but is it still relevant? Well, I decided to give it a reread and see. So Tim Ferriss in the book pretty much divides people up into the deferrers, people that are working 40 plus hours a week with the hopes of one day retiring in their mid to late 60s and then doing what they want to with their life. And people that he calls the new rich, who may work less hours, make less money, but are living a more retired lifestyle in the here and now. And let me tell you, this book is just as relevant today as it was 15 years ago, and I believe it'll be just as relevant in 15 years as it is today. And the tech and the how-to, not as valuable. You can probably skim over that if you want to. A lot of the stuff's outdated, like I said. But the great thing about this book is the way it teaches you to look at the world, the way it teaches you to ask questions and to experiment with everything, how to treat everything as an experiment. That is just such a undervalued thing that people just don't do enough of. I don't do enough of, and I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss. That part of the book is still hugely, hugely valuable, and I recommend reading this book and rereading it if you've already read it, like I have. And so these are just a few of the things that I found in the book that are still relevant to this day. And some of these will seem pretty obvious, but again, if you're not thinking about it, if you're not actively pursuing them, then even common sense things are worth revisiting. So the first one is just avoiding burnout. That you're supposed to work and rest in cycles, and I can't tell you how important that is. And what he says about it is not only will you get worn out working 24/7, but that by taking breaks, you'll actually increase your productivity. So you'll actually get more done by working less. It seems counterintuitive, but it does make sense, because if you're working 24/7 and you're burnt out, the quality of work you're putting out is not going to be the same as if you're well rested. Ryan Holiday talked about this. He was writing every single day before the pandemic, but he was spending a lot of time on the road. He would be writing in hotels, in airport lobbies, and things like that. And yeah, he was writing every day. He was getting the hours in, but the amount of output that he was getting was, 70%, 60% of what he can do when he's at home, in his routine, at his desk, putting out work routinely. That's when he can be most productive. And I bet it's the same for you. Whatever it is you're doing, If you're doing it 24/7, you're not doing it the most efficient way and the most effective way. And the next one hit very close to home, and that is that the timing is never right. I think he says in the book, the universe is not out to get you, but it also won't go out of its way to make everything perfect for you. So the stars will never be aligned just perfectly. If it's something you want to do it and correct course along the way. He says waiting for someday will take your dreams to the grave with you. He also says in the book, seek forgiveness, not permission. Basically, always err on the side of action. And then also you should emphasize your strengths instead of trying to improve your weaknesses. And not that you shouldn't try to improve on things, which I think you can always improve on just about anything, but that you should be leaning on your strengths. Find out what your unfair advantage is and push there. Another great point that he makes in the book is that money isn't really what you're after. You don't necessarily want to be rich. You want to live the rich lifestyle. And having just more and more money may not be the best way or the quickest way to get that kind of lifestyle. There's some people out there making a ton of money, but if you're working 80 hours a week, are you living that quote unquote rich lifestyle? Are you enjoying your life, or are you just deferring it for later on in life? And on that point, he says that relative income is a more important factor than absolute income. So someone that's making $50,000 a year in 3 months is actually better off than someone that's making $100,000 a year in 12 months working 40 hours a week. So it's not just the absolute dollar amount, it's the relative time to money income that's more important. Not all stress is bad. There is stress that's bad for you and unhealthy, but there's a certain level of stress that's good for you. It's when you're just outside of your comfort zone and just pushing yourself a little bit, where you're just uncomfortable. That stress is where you learn. That stress is where you grow. And without that, you get stale and stagnant, and you don't improve and you don't progress. So some stress is good. You got to figure out what stress is good and what's not. People are very, very scared of the unknown. Most people would rather be unhappy but certain instead of uncertain and happy. So people will sacrifice just about anything for just a little more certainty in their lives. And unfortunately, uncertainty is not something you can avoid. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the future. You may feel like you have a good grasp and a good guess on it, but you don't know. And sometimes you have to be a little uncertain in order to make progress. And that goes to the previous point about good stress. Sometimes being a little uncertain is that good stress, or is caused by that good stress. If you're trying something new and you're pushing the limits, you're probably going to be uncertain. You're probably going to be a little stressed, and it's probably what you need to be doing. Most people set reasonable goals, and he actually advocates in the book for setting big, ambitious, unreasonable goals. Because if most people are setting reasonable goals, there's more competition for those reasonable goals. So you'll actually have less competition going after bigger, audacious, ambitious goals. So aim high. And this is the part from the intro. What is the opposite of happiness? It's not sadness. And that's what first thing comes to mind. But the opposite of happy is actually bored. So if you're bored, you're not happy. And so he says, don't aim for happiness, aim for excitement. Because if you're excited, that'll take care of getting rid of any boredom, and you'll end up being happier overall. And so it gives you just a little more of a concrete goal than just be happy. You want to be excited, do things that are exciting to you. Again, he leans towards action. You should be doing, not just wanting. You should be taking action. He also goes over some pretty well-known things today. They were a little more new back then, but they're just as valuable. Like Parkinsons Law, which states work will expand to fill the time given to it. So if you have a week to write a paper, it'll take you a week to write a paper. If you have 1 day to write a paper, it'll somehow get written in 1 day. He also goes over the 80-20 principle, which basically just says 80% of your results will come from 20% of your efforts. And this is just something that shows up everywhere. Anywhere you look for it, you'll find it. From the stock market to the little garden outside the house. 80-20 rule is there. Be looking for it and learn to use it to your advantage. And then the how-to part of the book is, like I said, the tech from that 2007 book is outdated, but the principle is the same. You want to automate as much as you can and build yourself out of the business. He talks a lot in the book about one of the first businesses he built, and it was very successful, but he built it in such a way that it was impossible for him to ever sell that business because it was reliant completely on him. And so he just kind of goes over some principles that you want to be thinking about as you're building a business so that it's not dependent on you, and that at one point you can eventually step away from it and either have the company run itself pretty much, or set up in such a way that you can sell the company later down the road, which is a good way to be thinking about things. You always want to be automating yourself out of it. You don't want to make more work for yourself. You want to make more income for yourself. And probably one of the most important things from the book is don't be afraid to fail. Failure is good. Okay, success is good, but failure is good too. It's all data, and we need data in order to make decisions. So a failure is just as valuable as a success if you learn something from it. And he advocates treating everything in life as an experiment. If something's not working, maybe try the opposite of that. See what happens. He has a technique he calls fear setting. So I highly recommend you go watch his TED Talk on fear setting. And basically what he says is you should be not only setting goals for yourself, but you should also be taking some time to identify your fears and think about how you're dealing with them. Because you are dealing with them either in a healthy way or in a not healthy way. So it's worth it to take some time and really go over your fears and find out what's holding you back and what the worst case scenario is with those fears. So I reread this book thinking I would make a little summary on it, talk about how outdated the tech is. But what I didn't expect was for this book to excite me and to shake me almost as much as it did when I read it 15 years ago. This is a book that I need to be rereading every year, and I recommend you read it. If you've already read it, I recommend you read it again because it's valuable. There's a lot of good information in there. It's just a wonderful way to look at the world. The biggest thing for me out of that book is it gives you a lot of good questions. Elon Musk said that, figuring out the answers is pretty easy, but finding the right questions, that's the more difficult part and the more important part. And this book doesn't have all the answers, but it does have a lot of really good questions. So if you've read the 4-Hour Workweek, put down in the comments what part really struck you. What did you get out of the book? Is there any questions in there that really resonated with you? One of the questions that really hit me hard was, what would you do if you couldn't fail? If you were just 10 times smarter than everyone else and had everything going for you and it was just an absolute impossibility for you to fail, what would you do? And it's questions like that really gave me a lot of value. So I highly recommend it. I'll have a link down below in the description for it and a few other books I recommend. And again, just thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.